Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It helps me get out to the universe. And if you get anything from my work, a mic drop, an epiphany, a connect the dot, a light bulb moment, a new book to read, or a new author to explore, please considering supporting my work. It is most grateful, and I thank all of those who have done so already. I really do appreciate it. It's October and it's getting closer to Halloween. So, may I present Realms of the Living Dead? It's a book by the authors who wrote The Keys to the Universe and The Key to Destiny, two of my most cherished and favorite books. Um, these two authors are profound, and I'm like trying to find a book that they wrote that I could read, and I found one, and it's The Realms of the Living Dead, a brief description of life after death. How perfect for the month of October for all of you who are into that kind of topic. It's by Harriet Augusta Curtis and F. Homer Curtis. And I'm just scrolling through. And I'm going to read the introduction so we kind of get a gist of what this is. I haven't read this before. I kind of skimmed it and I was like, ooh, this is good. Introduction. In presenting this volume, the authors do not represent it to be a complete expulsion of life in the astral world, but only an elaboration of their lectures on the subject delivered during their transcontinental lecture tour of 1915 through 16. So put those dates in the back of your head to reference what they're doing and seeing compared to the paranormal life that we all know about now. Together with the lessons on the subject issued by them to the students of the Order of the Christian Mystics during 1914-1915. To give a detailed description of the astral world in all its phases would require quite a many volumes, a similar description of the life in the physical world. But owing to the present confused and changing conditions now manifesting on Earth, during which thousands upon thousands are seeking satisfactory information on life after death, it has been deemed advisable to give the general outlines in a constructive way without waiting for leisure fully to elaborate the subject. We wish to remind such earnest seekers of the promise of Jesus, quote, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come unto you, and I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever, even the Spirit of truth. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth, but the Comforter. He shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance whatsoever I have said unto you. End quote. Therefore, unless Jesus was a false teacher, it must be true that we are intended to have a realization of the truth that life is immortal, that the death of the body does not end all, and that a common sense and rational understanding of it is ours, and we will only open our hearts and let the Spirit of truth, which shall both comfort us and set us free from the bonds of ignorance, misconception, and misunderstandings. For only as we do open our hearts and correlate with the Spirit of truth, can it open our minds, expand our preconceived ideas, dispel our prejudices, and guide us into all truth. It is condensed and non-controversial. A presentation at this must necessarily be. No effort will be made to convince the skeptical or present elaborate arguments as to the reality of life after leaving the physical body. It is assumed that the seeker to whom these teachings will appeal, has long since been conceived of the survival of personal consciousness after death and is desirous of relatable information concerning the very conditions in which the consciousness functions. The fact of the survival of the personal consciousness will all its characteristic traits after leaving the physical body be considered beyond the stage of argument. It may seem absurd and illogical to the untrained mind to be told that the common fluid known as water is composed of two gases, oxygen and hydrogen, in the proportion of 1 to 2. But the subject is not open to argument. It is merely a question of information as to the facts discovered, tested, and proved by trained specialists in chemical research. The same is true of the problems of life after death. It is merely a question of information, not only concerning what has been taught on this subject by all great religions, spiritual teachers, philosophers, mystics, and saints, the greatest minds of the race throughout the ages, but also concerning the confirmation of those teachings, which has resulted from investigations of the keenest scientific minds of the day, men whose words is accepted as authority by the scientific world and whose mere opinion is given the greatest consideration. Co-host number 1 says, hi, that's Morgan. While many of the teachings herein given found confirmation in several works on psychic phenomena and other after-death conditions recently published, the scientists who are investigating this subject have not yet discovered all the facts herein explained, because they have no all-inclusive cosmic philosophy to guide them, and because they are content to wander aimlessly in the lower regions of the astral world, where the great spiritual teachers are seldom, if ever, found. Their investigations, sincere and honest though they be, are much like laborious searching through the plebeian sections of a great city for a scientist or professor who could explain the conditions met with all that would be necessary would be to take a taxi through the alums out to the university, where hundreds of professors who are authorities on all branches of knowledge are to be found. Indeed, few investigators ask their way to such centers of learning or even realize that such exist in the astral world. As far as we are aware, no previous attempt has been made to classify the various regions of the astral world on any logical or scientific basis. We therefore endeavor to present the subject in a way that can be readily grasped not only by students of the occult, but by the average intelligent reader. Although there is no sharp demarcation between the realms herein described, they are not entirely arbitrary divisions, for they follow and correspond to the sevenfold division of man and nature as well known to the students. We are well aware that there is a certain group of mental scientists, such as the followers of Hudson Warman, who consider all manifestations of the astral world as due to the subconscious mind, suggested autosuggestion, telepathy for the living, hypnosis. While we cheerfully admit the influence of all these factors are described herein, they still leave unexplained large gaps in our knowledge of the astral world and much of the undeniable phenomenon accounted for. Many such teachers oppose any exposition of the subject for fear that it would instill fear thoughts into the minds of the students, as if giving a traveler directions how to pass in safety through the slums of a great city, which incalculating in him the fear of entering it. Fear of a subject, condition, or experience can be conquered, not by denying its existence or refusing to consider it, but by accurate knowledge of its most important phases and how to master them. Therefore, while we represent all former warnings as to the many real dangers of investigating the astral world without competent guidance, in this work we have endeavored to remove all fear of the astral from the minds of those who will give it serious study by clearly setting forth the constructive principles whose application will master any condition encountered therein. The teachings herein presented are not the result of psychical research as ordinarily conducted, but are the teachings on the subject given to the authors by teachers of the order of the Christian mystics from the higher realms, transmitted through Miss Curtis by the independent method known as sorry guys, it's like in italics and I can't get the words. Theonoustichy. I'm just going to say channeling because that's what it is. Never saw that word in my life. While in full waking consciousness, in collaboration with Dr. Curtis, and verified by the personal psychic experiences in the astral world, these teachings are therefore not a mediumistic report of the experiences of one person and his deductions thereof, but from the constructive philosophy derived from those who know, which has been repeatedly tested and proved reliable. And that word that I am not pronouncing properly and I never seen is the mysterious power to hear orally the teachings or directions of a divine being. Channeling. The apathy is the ability to assimilate the nature of a divine being. The apathy is the actual appearance of a divine being to a mortal. Interesting. Chapter 1. The reality of the astral world. Quote, 3 halls, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 halls, O conqueror of Mara, will bring thee through 3 states into the 4th, and thence into the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. End quote. The voice of silence, Blavatsky. They love Blavatsky. There are so many conflicting teachings among the Christian sects as to the afterlife conditions, and so much has been said of the allurements and dangers of the astral world from the viewpoints of various schools of occult teaching, that we feel the teachings of the order of Christian mystics on the subject should be plainly stated, so its pupils may have a wider outlook and a clearer understanding of the subject than we have seen in many presentations, even elsewhere. To many, the very word astral is associated with something uncanny and dangerous, yet it is literal meaning is starry, from the Persian Ishtar, and it is still used in this sense in astronomy when referring to the stars. Its technical use as occultism, however, is in the sense of ethereal, finer or more subtle than physical matter. But on account of the frequent warnings, too many, the word has become a bugaboo. I'm not lying, it's there. In fact, in some schools of occult teachings, there is danger of the whole astral world with its entities, elementals, spooks, and its various other inhabitants occupying in the course of time the position of the old-time hell, devil, imps, etc. Hence, even in the speaking to those who have thrown off the thrall of fear under which the world shivered in the dark of centuries, and who's refused to believe in his majesty, the devil, we must be clear and positive, lest we merely continue the same fear, homage, and propitiation to the old beliefs under new names. Other schools took upon the astral as the heaven world, and their highest aim and greatest endeavor seems to be to reach into the world for the purpose of communicating with their loved ones, who, having cast off the veil of flesh, are supposed therefore to be clothed with glory and filled with omniscient knowledge and omnipotent power, able to prophesy and infallibly guide and instruct those who still remain struggling with the bonds of matter and the temptations of flesh. In these pages, we will try to show that the position of each of the above schools is correctly to a limited extent, yet without a cosmic philosophy which includes and gives its proper place to every phase of the astral, each standing alone in its extreme, which is misleading and which is likely to lead its followers into darkness and superstition, quite as dense and appealing as the Dark Ages. I know the school beholds that because of the dangers of the astral, it is best neither to investigate nor study about it until they have passed beyond it in their spiritual growth and can come back to it with full spiritual enlightenment after leaving the physical. Students who presently hold such an idea, instead of being wide awake when they reach the astral and learning their lessons and progressing, will remain perhaps years in a sleeping condition, dreaming about what they have conceived the higher realms to be. The teaching of the first school is but substituting one fear thought for another, while the second leads to the propitiation and worship of those who have cast off these dense physical body, but whose character, morals, and disposition are no more changed than a man's nature and character is changed by taking off his overcoat. Such should be given the love, honor, and respect which should be concealed to them on earth, because their character and ability, but no more. Job tells us, "The thing which I greatly feared is come upon me, and that which I was afraid of is come to me." A community swayed either by fear thoughts or by the worship of the departed naturally becomes intolerant and unbrotherly, and such conditions soon lead to persecution, for there is nothing so apt to make a man a bigot and sap for his nature all natural kindliness and love for his fellow man as to dwell in fear. Fear of the astral world may easily come to occupy the place of the medieval fear of the devil, which manifested first as the great desire to save man from the thing so greatly feared. As shown in the fiery and sermons and impressive admonitions of the early church, there is as a feeling of superiority over those who refuse to believe in the doctrine of the literal everything and ever-casting hellfire, thus making a separation between those who were saved and those who were lost, and finally leading by clearly defined steps to the burning of the heretics and all the horrors of the Inquisition. While we wonder how such things could be, as we look back at those times, still we can recognize that they took place not because the world was passing through a necessary nightmare of horror, but as a reasonable result of the natural growth of the seeds of fear and prejudice sown in the hearts and minds of mankind by the barbarous gospel of eternal damnation. For if you could bring yourself really to believe that a loved one would be burned forever unless he believed as you were taught he should, you might feel justified in restoring to means revolting to your own nature to save that loved one from such an eternal punishment, ever against his will or wish. Hence, it is well to pause and consider not the enormity of the crimes of the Dark Ages, but what led to those results, and the search carefully in the teachings of our own day to make sure that we are not cherishing some belief that is child of fear, or whose fruit of intolerance is perhaps even now leading us to condemn those who believe differently, even though that condemnation be but a shake of the head, a pitying look, a shrug, or as is frequently the case, a condemnatory utterance such as, those who have developed astral senses are born diseased, and those who communicate with the astral world are obsessed, etc. It is also lack of understanding which teaches that no one can communicate with those who have passed on without trifling with terrible dangers, that such communication must necessarily hold the loved one back in their evolution, while today the ignorance, superstition, and consequent persecution does not reach the lengths of a thumb screw and rack, yet it is none the less hard to endure, because it is more mental and social than physical. But this must be expected from the uncomprehending masses by the pioneers of every advanced idea. To understand the dangers of the second class of beliefs, that the astral and its inhabitants is the heaven world, we again only to glance back over history, for these two statements of belief are always found side by side. Just as ignorance and fear led to persecution, so the practice of the second belief gradually led to black magic, witchcraft, sorcery, and necromancy. A teaching or a belief must be judged by its ultimate results, just as man must be judged by the life he leads. By their fruits shall know them. The teachings of Christian mysticism stands midway between these two extremes, for truth is ever found in the center, neither at either extreme. What have I always been saying? You gotta come to center, come to neutrality. It must be remembered that while evolution is eternal process, the progress is spiral. Also, that each race and subrace, as evolution pushes it up the spiral path, must reach a point directly over that which the departure from the true teachings began. And it is at the point where it must meet the karma of the past and face the similar temptations. As a race and subrace, we must listen to the voice of the past and learn the lessons from the degradation and suffering which sprang from the departure from the true teachings, and carefully eradicate the karmic seed which will be found sprouting in our midst, just as the seed of a weed, which we thought had been killed out during the last season, will be found sprouting in the same place the next season. A wise gardener will destroy the tiny shoots, ere they have time to choke out the flowers. So it is with the seeds of karma. At each new cycle, we must look for the seeds of the same old weeds, which we struggle in the past, and root them out. For to suffer the same things over and over would no more exhaust their karma than for the gardener to allow the weeds to grow and choke out his crops year after year, in the hope that ultimately the weeds would exhaust themselves and the flowers would triumph. Damn. The race is now entering upon a new cycle, is now on the spiral of evolution directly over the point where the seeds of fear and intolerance, superstition, and witchcraft were planted in the former cycles. I beg everybody to look up the Council of Nicaea. Big time. Hence, the necessity for advanced students, instead of denying the existence of and turning away in fear from all things connected with the astral world, resolutely to face them and try to gain a reasonable understanding of their many phases, the many compensations as well as the terrors, the helps and hindrances, and the great opportunities to help humanity on the part of those who understand these conditions. In short, it should be realized, as the sages have always taught, that the astral world must be faced and conquered, not in the sense of destroying, but in the sense of being annexed, colonized, and ruled, just as the physical world must be conquered, annexed, and ruled, or we try and can truly be called masters of the land. The first principle for the student of the subject to grasp and realize is that the astral is real and not an imaginary or hypothetical world, as Sir Oliver Lodge tells us. Quote, though intangible and elusive, we have reasons to know that ether is substantial enough, far more substantial indeed than matter, which turns out to be a rare and filmy insertion in or modification of the ether of space, end quote. Only that is real to us, to which our consciousness responds. Thus, when we are unconscious or dreaming, the physical world no longer exists to us, for our senses do not respond to its vibrations. In the same way, the average man is unconscious of the astral world because his senses have not yet evolved to the point where they respond to its vibrations and report to the conditions to his consciousness. Yet it is just as real and it exists just as merely as does the physical world when we are unconscious of it. As man evolves, however, all his senses will gradually and normally become more and more sensitive and respond more and more perfectly to the vibrations of the astral world until he is fully conscious of its various conditions and inhabitants as he is of those of the physical world. For instance, the early races of mankind had no eyes, but in the course of evolution, certain sensitive spots in the face of those primitive beings gradually developed until definite organs of sight, the eyes, were evolved. Thus, it is the opening of the astral eyes. This is the next step after a certain stage in evolution is reached, and everyone must reach it, whether he will or not in due season. Each one must learn to use his senses in the astral world, and by his experience learn to judge the truth or falsity of their reports, just as he must learn to use his physical senses and understand their reports of the physical world. The dangers are real, just as are the dangers of the physical world, but there are no more to be feared than those of the physical. The astral world has been defined and included all those vibrations that lie between the increased physical activity, that is the atomic etheric state, and the slowest mental activity, that is the lowest division of the world of mind. Realize that the astral is a material world, although composed of matter in much finer and far more ethereal states than we must it in the physical world. In fact, so ethereal that even in its densest expression, the physical senses are scarcely able to respond to the vibrations. Nevertheless, the astral is a material world which exists above in the sense of being higher in the rate of vibration. The next higher octave, as well as extending far above and beyond the Earth's surface, around and within the physical world, interpenetrating every atom more completely than the airy penetrates every building, receptacle, or body. I speak about this all the time, the octaves, the overlays. The earth, therefore, as the famous Venerable Babe tells us, it is an element placed in the middle of the world as the yolk in the middle of an egg. To understand how this finer astral matter penetrates the coarser physical matter, think of a sponge lying on an ocean bed. The water surrounds and penetrates every fiber of the sponge. The salts, second in the water, also penetrate the sponge. A color fluid, third, may be added and also penetrates the sponge. A certain amount of air, four, is dissolved in the water or the fish could not breathe. This also penetrates the sponge. The light, 5, penetrates the water and illuminates the sponge. And finally, the water may be heated, and the heat, 6, penetrates the sponge. Thus, all these outer conditions of various forms and densities of matter constitute the physical world in which the life, 7th, of the sponge evolves and expresses itself. Just so is our physical body and its life immersed in the sea of the astral. and in the sea must evolve and express itself, whether conscious or not, of the exact nature and status of each surrounding element. The astral is therefore a locality in space in relation to the physical world, just as the ocean is definite locality to the sponge, although completely surrounding and interpenetrating and of a finer and more plastic matter. But it is also a state of matter conditioned by an octave of vibration above the octave within which the physical world manifests. Indeed, its lower realms are so physical that under certain conditions of condensation, their inhabitants can be photographed by ordinary camera. This is not a mere theory or even debatable question. For the long and elaborate scientific experiments of Sir William Crookes, during which the materialized astral body of Kate King was repeatedly weighed and photographed in his own laboratory in ample light and with his own instruments, and later the experiments of the Society of Psychic Research, to whose annal report you are referred, have long since settled the question both as to the reality and the material nature of the substance of that world. Also, an electrical instrument on the order of telegraph instrument, devised by David Wilson, M.A. of Cambridge, England, over which he has received hundreds of independent communications in all languages using the Morse code form, those who have left the physical world through death, definitely settles the questions of the possibility of communication with the departed. Therefore, since the reality and nature of the astral world and its possibility of conscious and intellectual communication with it is no longer open to argument, being merely a question of information as to the advances of science, it behooves occult students to familiar with the main outlines and principles of the world, but to describe it and its inhabitants in a few short chapters, it is quite as difficult as to describe all phases of the physical world and its inhabitants within the same limits. It appears as variously and impresses each investigator as differently, as does the city landscape, the mountains, or the sea, and hence is described as various. Necessarily, the more important phases and laws can be explained in these pages. Damn. I feel compelled to read chapter 2, which I'm going to. The rivers of life and death. Quote, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. End quote. Revelations. Before taking up the detailed description of the various divisions of the astral world, it will be helpful to note here the general description given in our lesson, The Rivers of Life and Death. Quote, one aspect of the great mother force, and perhaps its lowest, is that which is called the astral world or the astral plane, in which everything is reflected both from the spiritual realms above and the earth plane below. The ethereal and ratified matter of the astral world surrounds both this globe, its humanity in general, and each individual soul, just as amniotic waters do the unborn fetus, separating them from direct contact with their higher worlds. And as the fetus floats in the amniotic waters, which protect it, yet separates it from direct contact with the mother and the outer world, so humanity floats in the waters of the astral world, but unconscious of it. The amniotic waters are a secretion of the mother for the protection and nourishment of the fetus, for as they enter digestive tract, they furnish a large amount of water and nourishing amnionis substance, which initiate the activities of the digestive glands and functions. But in the last few months of prenatal life, these waters become contaminated with excretions of the digestive tract and the offscourings of the body, and when absorbed, these further stimulate excretion, even some hours after birth. Just as so with the astral waters, while they are secreted from the mother force and are necessary and nourishing in their higher aspects, they also are filled with the emanations, creations, and offscourgings of humanity, to breathe in which, as it is so often attempted through forcing psychic development before the true spiritual birth, means moral death or insanity just as surely as breath in the contaminated amniotic waters would mean physical death to the fetus. But sweeping through these amniotic waters via the umbilical cord is a great stream of purified blood flowing from the heart of the mother and carrying to the fetus the currents of life force and nourishment without which its growth and development would be impossible. So through the muddy waters of the astral world, there's a great streams of spiritual life force to which the blood corresponds in the physical plane, direct from the heart of the Divine Mother. And unless we assimilate these force of divine love and build it into spiritual growth, we will remain forever as spiritually undeveloped and unborn as the fetus would physically, did not assimilate to the bloodstream from the mother. Quote, appreciating the significance of the symbology, we see that we must indeed be born of water, of spirit, end quote. For just as the fetus is born into and spends its prenatal life floating in the amniotic waters, so must we be born into and be surrounded by the astral world and imbued its lessons, even imbibing the knowledge of some of its lower and unpleasant phases. We can be born into the world of breath or spirit. And in our undeveloped stage, we float blindly, not able to cognize our surroundings, and are not able to breathe the true spiritual atmosphere. After the fetus has assimilated the mother force and reached the last stages of its prenatal development, it must begin to digest and secrete for itself. Its assimilated system is prepared to meet the conditions of individual life which prevail after birth, just our spiritual birth. We are blindly fed by the spiritual force of the great river of life, which flows through the astral world. But there comes a time when we must imbibe for ourselves and assimilate that which is good in the waters of the astral and cast out that which cannot utilize for our upbuilding and ongoing. In other words, our organs of spiritual digestion and elimination must be developed and begin their functions, or we are ready to meet the conditions of independent individuality in the higher realms after our mystical new birth. End quote. Quote, among the Greeks, the river of life was symbolized by the river Styx, a river of life and immortality which flowed through Arcadia and emptied into the river Archeon. The river Styx was considered the most sacred of all rivers, so much so that Zeus, the father of the gods, ordained that most solemn oaths of the gods should be sworn upon it. If such an oath were violated, the forsworn had to lie in a trance for a year, and then for 9 years was debarred from the society of the gods. The river Archeon, on the other hand, the river into which the Styx flowed, was regarded as the river of death, which separates our manifested existence from the state they called the netherworld, the river of nether regions over which the souls of the dead were referred by the mystical boatman Carrion. The reality of the symbology is quite plain once we remember that Archeon, the river of death, is the great stream of astral force which surrounds mankind like the amniotic waters do to the fetus. So there's indeed a real river of death, as there is a real river of life, over which the souls of all who pass out of physical life must cross. But unless they have had their spiritual birth while still in the physical life, they cannot cross at will, but are ferried over by the mystical boatman Carrion, generally in a state of unconsciousness, which lasts for a longer or shorter period according to their development and their knowledge of the conditions. This is why so many who return to communicate with mortals from that which is called the other shore described most graphically how they awakened upon the shore of a great dark river, whose swift current silently flowed between them and their loved ones, describing also the angel of light who bore them across. Those who had much experience with psychic research and had communicated with those who had passed over the river are amazed at the great mass of testimony which is given concerning this river and its angel. Yet it is a very real river of force. This should not be surprising, since the literature and religion of man from the most remote ages bear the same testimony. There must be a universal principle back of the symbology. The river of death is the stream of astral force secreted by the Great Mother, which flows around our universe as the amniotic waters of the fetus. In one aspect, the river of death is the river Jordan, over which the children of Israel, the chosen of the Lord, must pass to enter the promised land. Physically, the Jordan is a rushing, turbulent, and very muddied stream, accurately symbolizing its astral counterpart. For the astral being, your great reflector, contains all the mud, debris, and off-scourgings of earth, mingled with the pure, clear waters of life from the spiritual plane. And those who venture into the muddy, turbulent currents without an angelic guide, not a mere disembodied friend or astral entity, but a master of light to bear them safely over, without the spiritual growth by which they had become consciously united to the great river of life from their divine mother, are apt to be either swept away by the swirling currents or to be attacked by the denizens of the deep. Yet the law is that this river of death must be crossed. In other words, though we may be ferried over this river many, many times from the gate of death, we can never pass over dry shod and enter the promised land until we dare to respond to the call of Joshua, the Christ man who commands the waters to divide, and follow him across. Many who say at once, "Here have we not been warned of the dangers of entering the astral world and of developing our psychic faculties?" To which we answered yes. We do not advise any effort being made to open such faculties or any attempt made to function in the astral world until you have become so pure of heart, so true of spirit, so faithful to your teacher, so kind and loving that you can consciously drink of the crystal waters of the river of life, or crossing Jordan. For those waters must become a well of water springing up within you into everlasting life. And you must be able consciously to bathe in the crystal river proceeding out of the throne of God, the place where the divine in you rules all your conditions, your life, and all its activities. For there are many terrible dangers. There are sunken rocks covered with slime, quicksands, and pools of vicious mud. There are venomous snakes and many unsightly creeping things, and there is all manner of disease and filth in this stream. Therefore, we repeat all previous warnings and say, do not attempt to enter or cross the stream until you have the power to say to its waters, divide, that I must cross dry shod. Only as you enter, the command of the Christ man Joshua, can you make all that is good and pure and helpful stand as a wall of protection and helpfulness upon your right hand, and all that is evil or impure to flow away your left hand, and out of your life to be swallowed up in the great deep. You are then not attempting to cross in your own strength or at the command of curiosity or desire for sensation and psychic experience, but are following the Ark of the Covenant in obedience to your divine guidance. Just as the intrepid mariner Odysseus, who would fain cross this river and penetrate into the netherworld, had to steer a ship amid course less, on the one hand, an alluring voice of the siren Celia and should charm his sailors' faculties, and one of her 7 arms pluck them from the deck to be devoured, and on the other hand, lest his ship be sucked in and engulfed by the roaring maelstrom of Chibridus, so must the advanced student, when he has learned to master his ship of life, sail a middle course between the honeyed voice of silica, enticing him to develop his psychic faculties and enter the astral world of glamour and fascination, and the lore of Chaldidus, which will engulf his life in various forms of astral intoxication and psychic debauchery. For this is a world to be passed through under perfect control, but is not the Father's home. It is the hall of learning. In it, thy soul will find the blossoms of life under every flow and flower of a serpent coiled. But easy the passage the student must when his ship of life is captained by Odysseus. In other words, we would never become truly enlightened or illumined. We'll never become the mystical sons of God, so often referred to, with our third eye open, able both to see and know and understand until sometime in the course of our evolution and training, of our own free will and without waiting for the angel of dark to carry us, we can walk boldly into Jordan at the command of Joshua and cross over dry shod. In Eastern scriptures, the neophyte who takes this step is referred to as he who has entered the stream. The first step is conquering the river of death and crossing into the promised land, is correlating your consciousness and life, not the astral world, but with the great spiritual bloodstream from the Divine Mother, the river of water of life. Once dipped in this stream, as Achilles was dipped in the river Styx by his mother, Thetis, and you become invulnerable to every phase of temptation and evil. And it is only by bathing your life in divine love and compassion that invulnerability and immortality can ever be obtained. And it is only the divine mother love that can dip you into the streams of immortal life without overlooking the heel, the first part of the foot, understanding to touch the earth, as did the mother of Achilles, and enable you to conquer death. Strive, therefore, for the divine love and wisdom which shall enable you to learn your lessons out of every psychic or astral experience with great law, brings you in the course of your normal development. But keep ever in mind that you are but marching through these experiences to the promised land. So I'm going to leave that there. I hope that was interesting for you guys. As it is Halloween season, so Samhain to some that Soween, whatever you would like to acknowledge. I think this book is quite interesting, speaks my language very much so, and understandings of both because we live in duality. Sending each and every one of you love and light. I hope everybody enjoyed this. There's a lot more to come, and I'll see you on the next one. Amish Mindset. Bye, guys.